Welcome back to the third and last session of this afternoon. The session is called How to Create a Comeback, Practical Learnings from the Crisis Period. And it promises to be a very interesting session with a great panel where we will be discussing the road to recovery, which is certainly, no matter what kind of hotel it is, a very bumpy one. So I'm looking forward to getting some insights and on the different approaches taken by the various brands presented today and by the panelists this afternoon. However, before we start, I'd like to point you to the Slido question and answer section. So please feel free if you have any questions to ask them there in between, and we will make sure to answer them during our panel. Also, we have the results of the polls which just took place, and they're now on the screen for you to see. Quite interesting results, which I will pick up in a minute as well with my lovely panel. So let me introduce the panel to you. I'm joined this afternoon by Julie White, Vice President Commercial for EMEA at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Welcome, Julie. I am also joined by Andreas Westerburg, Head of Development at Best Western Hotel Group. Hello, Andreas.
Good afternoon.
And last but not least, I'm joined by Stefan Matthiessen, Chief Brand Officer for Koncept Hotels. Hello, Stefan.
Hi, everyone.
So maybe to provide a little bit of background on our panelists, Julie has been appointed Vice President Commercial for EMEA at Wyndham Hotels and Resorts in January this year. And she's responsible for all the commercial activities of Wyndham Hotel Brands and Resorts. She had a long-standing career and deep knowledge of the travel industry, which led across various areas, like from M&A consulting at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and before that 17 years in the airline industry at leading global carriers. Julie lives now in London, and lovely London, but is from California. But with all the countries you lived in and the languages you speak, I think you're a truly global person. So lovely to have you with your experiences on the board. And Andreas has more than 25 years of experience in hospitality. This is only good, Andreas. It's only good in various larger groups, from Steigenberger over Hilton, and now to Best Western Hotel Group, where he always held very senior positions. He's managed and experienced hotels on their commercial side in high demand as well in very challenging times. He has opened and closed many hotels, and luckily more openings than closings, actually. However, he's as well. He says as well that what we're seeing today, the interruption, the dimension of it, is nothing to be compared what he has witnessed so far. On the team this afternoon as well.
Thank you.
And Stefan is the Chief Brand Officer from Koncept Hotels, and I think Koncept Hotels is the youngest addition, if we look at the youngest brand, if we look at the panelists this afternoon. Stefan is an experienced Chief Marketing Officer with an MSc focus in international marketing. He has not only worked in hospitality, but held various e-commerce positions across different industries, like insurances, for example. And he believes strongly in shortcuts, I must say. So, welcome, Stefan, to this afternoon's session as well.
Pleasure to be here.
Right, so we're going to talk about how to create a comeback, the practical learnings from the crisis period. And it was quite interesting to see the poll right now, where one of the questions was, will people be willing to pay more for additional measures to be put in place? It's interesting to see, we as the panel able to watch it as it was developing, that it changed from no to yes in the end. What is your opinion on it? How price sensitive is the guest when it comes to additional hygiene or other measures being put in place? What do you think, Julie?
So we did a similar survey of our Wyndham Rewards members throughout the region, and we had about 6,000 respondents, and it came back with a reasonably consistent to your view of the poll here today, that people are mostly concerned about finding value in the hygiene and feeling safe about staying at a hotel, and they're also looking for the value in their experience, but price is not going to be the primary motivator. Location and hygiene were the two deciding factors. And so we have geared our programs and promotions around that, knowing that we want to protect ADR for our hotels because we know occupancy is challenged right now. So it's about keeping pricing stable, but keeping the initiatives and building the trust back for the consumer so they feel safe.
Okay. Yeah, I think as well the question here to ask is whether the customer will expect certain levels of hygiene and other as a standard in this time, and not necessarily expect to be paying for that extra because the behavior might have changed. What do you think, Stefan? Is that like the new normal, so to speak?
Well, I personally think that everything that we hotels are now trying to achieve to achieve a certain level of hygiene and security for our guests, at one point is going to become a commodity for them, like hot water was, like Wi-Fi was, and at the start, I think the sensitivity of the people, our guests, to pay for that is higher than it will be in, let's say, 6 months time, 12 months time. Because to be honest, I personally think that we're going to be facing the aftermath of this pandemic longer than we probably think today, and the measures that we are now implementing in our hotels in terms of hygiene and security for our guests are probably there to stay, and they are probably not going to be decreasing in cost, but the willingness of our guests to pay for them and to pay extra for them is going to decrease probably. I'm not the expert on that, but I would think that it could happen like that, and something like hygiene has always been the bottom line of what people expect in the hotels. Now we have a different situation with hygiene being a factor that can severely influence your health and the health of our guests and employees. But at some point, it's going to be the bottom line again, and we have to keep a sharp eye on how we're going to deal with those costs when not being able to charge more.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think we might potentially in this adaptation of this as a commodity see a difference between the leisure and the business traveler as well, whereas potentially the business traveler might see this a little more relaxed, but once he's traveling with little children, he might see this he might see this differently. Have you witnessed this sort of change in behavior from the guest, Andreas? Like when it comes to the hygiene, are they willing to pay a higher price? Are they asking particularly ahead of the stay, for example, for certain factors?
I must admit, we don't have yet, a full picture of whether people are really able to pay a higher price. I think what was important for us at the first stage is to see how relevant are new hygienic standards, for guests. I agree what Stefan said. Hygiene and cleanliness was always and is always must be the DNA of the hospitality industry. So in a way, I was personally very surprised in the outbreak of the pandemic that there was a kind of a competition, a rally taking place about the most and the best and the most creative measurements, to carry out hygiene. I think we have to be, let's say, very careful and not, let's say, leave a picture that we didn't care of hygiene and cleanliness, let's say, before. We study on a day-to-day basis the feedback that we receive from social media on all of our hotels, really on a daily basis. What is a very, very big surprise is that for the vast majority, people do not comment very much on cleanliness or hygienic standards. Interesting enough is that the biggest chunk of feedback refers to the revised breakfast standards. This is really, people are very disappointed when breakfast standards have been reduced. Probably also not always necessarily been communicated the right way. I personally think if you ask people, are you willing to pay a higher price? We have seen now the results, which are more almost even. 50% say I will pay, and the other 50% will say I will not pay. I wonder how we would do this. In a world with flexible and floating rates, if we would do it as a price, that comes a fixed price on top, I think that would change the picture completely. If we say, we add 10 euros, 15 euros or dollars or British pounds on every room rate. So I cannot really say what the guests are really willing, to do at the end.
Absolutely, particularly if you would do this transparently. Like, would you like to add an extra cleaning service COVID into your basket? Thank you. That'd be an interesting factor to see. But yeah, talking about prices, what other measures have you put in place? Has price be in trying to recover business? Has price been a factor in your brands? Because at the beginning, I remember that many people started comparing to previous crises, and that there was always the question, or as well the reminder, please don't drop prices like you did this before. It's not the right way. So what was the response, or still is maybe the response? Are you adjusting flexibly on the prices? Are you bringing in other services, other offers? Julie, what has Wyndham done in that area?
Sure. So we definitely spent quite a time recalibrating a lot of our programs, recognizing that we didn't want to do just price-led promotion. So we definitely focused on trying to respond to the consumer requirements for greater flexibility, the willingness for different segments, like the MICE segment is looking for something that is very different. So building out things like hybrid promotions where we can do hybrid, virtual, hybrid, on property, and being able to be flexible with different types of customer demand. We built out and focused a lot on rather than multinational corporate business and doing heavy discounting to capture those big high value corporates. We've done a lot more to develop small, medium enterprises and giving a lot of targeted business the demand side has changed so significantly that we had to really rethink and redevelop. And a lot of it has been more attribute based around terms and conditions and flexibility and length of stay requirements, Saturday night stay requirements, that kind of thing, versus only on price, because that's what our consumers have been telling us.
Yeah, and I think that definitely, with all this insecurity happening, is that even if you're willing to pay a certain price, if you're not, you don't be stuck with it, like X amount of days out if you see something changes. So I think flexibility on terms and conditions is what we've seen a lot in that regard as well. It makes a lot of sense. Andreas, do you see a difference when it comes to local travel or local incentives across various regions, like from Best Western? Is there like national or cross-border? Is there a difference? In my conversation just now with Ben Joost from Trust You, he made a very interesting comment, which was that whereas if we look at Europe, for example, a lot of the international travel during the holiday period has been replaced by national travel, people staying in their country, potentially even going camping or to self-catering. However, if you look at Singapore, for example, they don't have that. Like, they don't let people in. There is a difficulty in filling that. Luckily, they're very wealthy, but the hotels don't have this chance of recovering. So, Andreas, across Best Western Group, have you seen a difference depending on the region, on like what incentives or what has been put in place and how the travelers are responding to it?
Definitely. I think what you need to focus currently on is really business that is, let's put it very simple, able to make it to your hotel. You cannot, target any hotel, any business that require, long air travel, et cetera, et cetera. So we are, for the most regions, in a, compared to the situation, relatively comfortable situation. In most larger regions, Best Western is not only considered, let's say, a global brand. We have a very strong also national awareness and perception. Like what Julie mentioned, we focus definitely on small and medium account corporate business, and we promote stays that give you a break from Corona. I must admit, people are in a way sick and tired to hear the news every day. They want to have something they can dream of. They want to have a place, where they can really take a break. These promotions actually work very well. Of course, always considering, our hygiene statement, because we care. I think that is important, to remind people that there is a responsibility from the hotels, but also a responsibility from the guests, to make sure that no one, gets infected. But for the time being, really the focus on business that you can travel, say, by car, and you can, probably travel up to 5-6 hours. That is the particular particular time that you need to focus at right now.
Yeah, in particular, after you've been stuck with your children on homeschooling for ages in a small apartment, you need to get out. So, Stefan, Koncept hotels are like anyway very focused on local, sustainable, regional. How has that affected you, or what behavior do you see in your guests? What incentives have you put in place? Germany, Switzerland, Austria, that's still all drivable, so to speak. So how did you experience that as Koncept hotels?
Well, it's true what you say. Our destinations are drivable from our main markets. However, all of our hotels are situated in major cities, which currently are not the destinations that benefit from what Andreas just said, that everybody's fed up from staying at home probably in an urban environment and just trying to get out. So what we generally see is that not only we, but I would guess pretty much all city hotels or hotels in urban areas do struggle with demand. It's not true that there is zero demand, but the demand has most certainly decreased a lot during the last couple of months. What we figured out quite quickly is that lowering prices does not create additional demand. It might help. It does help a bit, especially when we see that our competitors from let's say less economy hotel brands are now targeting similar target groups as we did before. It does help a bit to play with the prices. In the end, however, I think cost is really king. If you know how much your room costs are and how flexible you are in terms of your pricing, that's really helping to keep working feasible and to keep running your business. Sustainability. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I personally, and I might be a bit biased because I'm responsible for the brand here, but I personally believe that all companies, not only in hospitality or tourism, will have a great benefit after the crisis is over and even now, if they really focus on what they stand for, if they really focus on their why, and know that and transport that to the customers, because we've always seen that our guests do cherish the way we work and find that great, but we experience a very tremendous increase of people really booking us because of what we do, because we have been focusing very hard on communicating that during the crisis. Sustainably and defining sustainability maybe a bit broader than just ecologically. That's what we strive. Yeah, that's what we strive for.
Plus, I mean, during the crisis, you went quite some different ways as well with regards to crowdfunding and vouchers you put in place to help a bit along. Has that been successful for you?
It has been successful in two ways. We didn't collect a large sum by our crowdfunding campaign. It was around 10,000 euro, which most certainly did not save us, but it created awareness, which was far more important at that early stage, because we started off, I think, mid-March with our crowdfunding campaign, which was immediately after the first shutdowns really hit us hard, and we got no more bookings, we got no more guests staying at us, and revenue pretty much dropped from 100% to 0% within a couple of days. And staying in the media, staying in the mind of our guests, creating awareness of what we do, because I think that it's quite unique what we do and how we deal with our partners, how we deal with our projects that we support. That has helped us a lot, and obviously the money was good as well, especially in terms of being money that came from vouchers. And vouchers always mean future guests and instant cash flow, so that's always good. in our industry. So yes, I think the campaign was quite successful for a small brand like we are at Koncept Hotels. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, and awareness and communication, I think, is key. And I would like to talk a bit about communication, because one thing which stuck with me is the experience a friend as well from the hospitality industry and well versed in how hotels are run experienced when crossing from Germany to Denmark with small kids and staying at 3 different hotels and having different communication ahead of the stay in each of them, and different standards and different rules in all of them, whether a child of under 10 had to wear a mask or not, whether there was breakfast or not, which brings me back to what Andreas was mentioning earlier on the guests being mostly disappointed that the breakfast standard, or one of the larger disappointments being that the breakfast standard has changed. So I think communication is always key to the guests, like even in normal times. So pre, during, and post stay, however, communication has become more important right now. Julie, has Wyndham taken a special step in that regard? Is there how have you changed your communication towards the guests?
So it has been difficult, and I think across the hospitality industry, not just hotels, with the restaurant experience is also very incredibly, as everyone is just figuring this out as we go. It's figuring it out real time, and the differences by market, by state, by region are so government mandates are so different in each country that it's really difficult to create that consistency. And as a brand, that gives us, the multinational brands, an incredible challenge to how do we communicate with across a whole region, across the whole world. And so we've been testing and learning as we go. We are primarily a franchise-driven environment, and so we've got over 9,000 franchisees around the world. We've got just over 500 in Europe, and we've been trying to give them consistent tools to the general managers so that they can use a consistent tool and adapt it to their needs. A few things like a pre-arrival letter that we've created and drafted for them to adapt with the things that they're doing in their market. And other types of guest communications in the hotel. And then the one really, really consistent thing that we've done is the whole Count on Us branding that we've used, that they can adapt their sub-brand to, but it's consistent across all the different Count on Us initiatives that gives a sort of brand promise. It's really difficult too, because guests themselves come with such different expectations. You have some guests who are on the spectrum of being really conservative and don't want to be within 2 meters or even 3 meters of another guest. And then you have other guests who are more confident, more kind of done with the restrictions and want to behave differently. So even within a consistent, where we're trying to be consistent, it's hard to be consistent when our guests aren't consistent with each other. So we're trying to support our teams, our GMs in particular, with how to deal not only with the protocols, but how to deal with the resilience of dealing with this strange adaptation to a whole new world. So I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes very much sense. I think, there is as much insecurity or looking for the right way in travelers as there is in hotels, or the other way around. From a communication perspective, Stefan, how are you handling that with your hotels? I guess you have quite a different type of travelers, more tech-affine, and potentially Wyndham Hotels potentially has more conservative in what you need to do communication. I'm always looking at what airlines and even the trains in various countries are doing now, where you get a lot of information before, during, and afterwards. Have you adapted with Koncept Hotels something of that sort?
Well, first of all, I must say the complexity of the way we communicate is on a completely different level than what Julie just said, and kudos. You do a very good job there. But yes, indeed. I mean, pre-stay communication especially has been of percentage of our guests that do not know what they are going to expect when they come to us. We run our hotels without staff on property. That's important to say. So we do have staff, but they are just not on property, and that's still very irritating for some guests. Although it must be said that the percentage of them not knowing what they will get decreased a lot during the last couple of months, because I personally believe that guests are now even more sensitive of what they book than before. In previous times, I personally saw it myself. When I'm going on a business trip, I just booked any hotel that's near where I wanted to be for business reasons. I would do that differently today, we can most certainly track that people do know more about what they book with us, because we get a lot less questions and a lot less bad ratings for not having staff on property to check them in. So pre-stay communication has always been key for the success of our concept, and so to say, we think the way disruptive concepts are now perceived and also handled with by guests are maybe there's a bigger exception for that. You know, there's the guest is more willing to read through information that has been sent prior to their stay to them, and is more willing to accept that hotels might not be the same as they knew it before, except, and Andreas is completely right, we have one hotel where there used to be breakfast, and which there is also food served now, but differently, and that's a major point of complaint. So that's I think the only thing that people will never accept, that they do not have the buffet breakfast anymore. But other than that, I think it makes people more aware of what they do, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You know, being more conscious about your actions when going on travels.
Absolutely. So we're getting a lot of questions in Slido, and I will move over in a minute, but I would really like to ask you one question still on my own, which is the keynote from Professor Dr. Vanessa Borgman just now on the future of smart hotels. I found it very interesting, and I think there's as well questions in Slido in that regard. But I wanted to ask you about, in all these troubled times in this COVID, is this the right moment to review the tech stack? Is this like the future? Should hotels or have hotels, have you taken the time to actually use it as an opportunity to review the tech stack, maybe as well with view of reducing touch points, staff and whatnot? Andreas, what did Best Western do in that regard? Or did you at all?
Yeah, I mean, we started, this whole process already before, the corona pandemic actually started. Because it is, a requirement nowadays, to review processes, to automate and standardize certain things which are still manualized today. So we started this whole process already prior the pandemic. The pandemic, of course, has put, let's say, different challenges now in place, specifically on the liquidity side. So the question is how much of tech changes can be financed at that point. But I think, needless to say, I mean, every entrepreneur, every business, let's say leader, I mean, every single hotel or hotel chain need to think of that is a moment to review everything. I mean, the tech part, but let's face it. I mean, you need to review whether your business model is still made for the next couple of years. Stefan just mentioned, I mean, there's a big difference what you also see between not all, but many leisure resorts and hotels in big cities. When air travel will be interrupted for the next 3 to 4 years in the same dimension as it is interrupted right now, I mean, you need to review whether, sorry to say, are you able to survive even, 3 or 4 years? If you are, let's say, if the answer is yes, then again, you need to review in your offer. I mean, is the offer still appropriate to what you can, to what clients actually refer to? And if all these answers are been given, I mean, then you can probably also make a plan. What will the tech side require, rather than now starting, a tech side without really asking the hard question, business model, and is the offer still appropriate for the time after the corona? Because I mean, a lot of things will change. We have recognized that people are very suspicious in terms of things which are touched multiple times by guests. Probably like many other brands, we have removed things out of the hotel room as much as possible. And I think the need for keyless and probably even staffless check-in and check-out has never been as big as that. For Best Western, we are working on several scenarios. I mean, also operating more than 4,000 hotels in more than 100 countries will not be easy, to just press the button and make these changes, overnight. It's a step-by-step process. We have to review very carefully, whether we use one system or whether we allow, let's say, multiple systems that can interlink into these things. So this is currently under a complete review. But I think most important is this is the moment to ask questions that probably haven't been asked for the past 5 to 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree very much. Unfortunately, we're getting a bit short on time. Therefore, I'd like to jump into the question and pick up the first one, which is, what are the cost reduction potential of smart hotels? So it leads nicely on. And which advantages do they have compared to the big traditional hotel chains? Stefan, why don't you, from your point of view, and then Julie, I'd like to get your opinion afterwards as well on that.
Well, first of all, I have to agree to everything that Andreas just said. If your business model is not right, it is now the time to review that. And although I think that this crisis does drive digitalization, I would probably say do not digitalize because of the sake of digitalization. Nevertheless, digitalization does help you to reduce costs. And a short answer, review every process that is done by humans, redundant process, communication to housekeeping, everything that is done manually and repeatedly by your staff, that's a potential for automation and digitalization, which does not necessarily mean reducing staff, but more, at least that's how we see it, making work in hospitality more intelligent, more appealing to people working in our industry, not doing redundant jobs over and over again, but to keep focusing on the things that are important in our industry, which is making our guests happy and potentially making our societies a bit better every day.
Yeah, the routine jobs, absolutely. Julie, what are the cost reduction potentials like from your point of view?
It's an interesting reflection. So coming from the airline industry, it is definitely a part of the cost-cutting initiatives the airlines went through several years ago as a part of just survival. Within that they adapted and reduced a number of functions. And it's exactly as you said, Stefan, that we looked at different processes and where we could replace it and streamline, and also asked the guest, the traveler, to do more on their own and using apps and things like that. So I know from a Wyndham perspective, what we've been doing is, first of all, accelerating and elevating some of the existing capability that we have. So things that hadn't had a whole lot of adoption, we're trying to raise them back to the forefront of guests' mind and our own team's minds. Things like different apps to get information on their phones, different things to like QR codes that hadn't had a huge level of adoption. We're trying to re-promote those and accelerating them. And to your point, there's a lot of hotels that either cannot afford to bring back their staff full time, or that they have staff members who are uncomfortable and for their own personal health reasons are not coming back. So hotels are already having to learn how to do existing processes with fewer people. So that is driving efficiency gains left and right. And they're having to learn how to lean into existing technology. The next step is going to be, how do we then, as a brand, give them more technology that they can adopt and work into. Our challenge, again, being a very large multinational, and I think, Andreas, you'd have this too, is we have lots of hotels on slightly different tech. And so trying to find a tech that's consistent for multiple different PMSs, for multiple different environments is probably our challenge. We're up for it. We're doing it. We're looking at it. But it is going to be a process of getting the efficiencies you can and incremental gains as you can while using existing, and then building newer and better on top. They have to go in parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from Ireland, from Amanda, which goes a bit in the same direction. So are there any tested examples of low-cost technology innovations in response to COVID, driving better service, revenue performance, and operational efficiencies? So have you discovered any? Julie, you were nodding, so.
Yeah, the QR code, using a QR code. It's a really simple, straightforward thing. Hotels can do them and set up, a web page that links to a QR code really quickly. Ordering off of menus is a great way. So doing like room service for the hotel, doing in restaurants, being able to do a different kind of welcome message at check-in and about what's your COVID response initiatives. QR codes are great, and I think they were really underutilized in the pre-COVID environment, and now consumers are figuring out how much they can use them. And the user adoption previously was very much millennial oriented. Now we're seeing older generations figuring it out and adapting to it more consistently. So that's a quick and easy one.
Perfect. And I've heard this several times today. Unfortunately, we're really running out of time. So one last question, and I'll do the round quickly, which is, when do you think hotel business will be back to normal? In 2021, 2022, or later on? I'll start on the top. Andreas, what do you think?
Well, you cannot, I think this is very difficult to be answered for the entire hospitality industry. There will be regions, there will be certain sets or clusters of hotels that will recover earlier than others. Interesting enough, if we are looking into our portfolio, a lot of, let's call it C and D destinations, their performances are picking up week over week. I'm sorry, I was gone.
There. Just quickly to
yeah. So I think the fastest, let's say the fastest recovery we probably see by mid of next year, and the latest one probably by 2024.
Thank you, Julie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I echo the same from what Andreas is saying. I think it is going to be very regionally based and also very, very much by type of hotel. I think the luxury segment is going to take longer to recover, whereas I think economy and mid-scale will be faster adaptation for a whole series of reasons. And I do think there is no return to normal as we knew it. It is the new normal as we are still defining it, and how that looks like. But I agree with the timelines that you laid out. It's going to vary based on location.
Super, thank you, Julie. Stefan, closing words.
I have nothing to add. The two have way more experience in the hospitality industry than I do. So I'm not making any predictions here. I think it's all a bit looking into a crystal ball. I really think working day to day, trial and error, and see where we're going is the way forward until we are at a level where we can all survive and bring forward our brands, bring forward our employees, and keep doing what we love doing, having guests in our hotels.
Thank you. Perfect closing words. So thank you very much. It's been fantastic talking to you in this brief 45 minutes. It's a pity it's so short. We still had questions left over, and I had as well still some more. So thank you very much. And thank you as well for attending our session this afternoon. Please join us for the next ITB Virtual Convention on the 15th of September, when we will be talking about global tourism demand. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.